Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast. We are at episode 21. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very special guest out in New Jersey, my home state, Frankie Dades. Frankie, what's up, man?
What's up, Joe? Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. We've known each other now for probably about a year, right?
Probably a little bit over.
Yeah.
We got into BPN together.
Yeah, so that was what, timeline-wise, that was probably October of 2020?
Yes.
Yeah, time flies, man. It's crazy.
I know.
And just to see that group grow has been so special. But, before we jump into all that, why don't I just throw the ball in your court, let you introduce yourself. You can tell us whatever is important to you, and we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good. So my name is Frank Dades. I'm from Staten Island, New York City. I grew up a very athletic kid. I played numerous different sports: basketball, football, boxing. I was kind of a shy, timid kid. Grew up, went to college, went away to college. For me, it was away. It wasn't that far, but, it made a big difference. North Jersey. I was away at college for 4 years. Right out of college, I went into construction, and I did it to make some extra money, until I got called for the job that I wanted. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions that I've ever made to work that job. We could dive into that a little bit deeper. And then I wound up with the New York City Fire Department. Over the years, I've experimented in countless different styles of training, from bodybuilding, CrossFit, and now I'm in the endurance space, and it's probably my favorite space to be in.
Yeah, it's been cool to watch your transition more toward the endurance side of things over the past, I guess, maybe year to 6 months. But before we jump into that, I want to give you a chance to really tell the world what Staten Island's all about, right? My mom is from Staten Island. My grandparents live there. And sometimes I feel like Staten Island gets a bad reputation. So I just want to publicly give you a chance, tell the world what's great about Staten Island, because it has stuff going for it, right?
It definitely does. It does get a bad rep, and I'm not going to defend the bad rep that it does get, because I see where it comes from. It's very small, and it's close-knit, so everybody knows everybody. There are great people there. The food is great. Honestly, I like the food better in Staten Island than most parts of Brooklyn, and Brooklyn is also known for its food. So it's very, very culture pride. So it's like everybody takes a lot of pride in their culture, whatever that may be. It's a very mixed society. So it does have a lot going for it, and it's gotten extremely populated over the years. So people are starting to open up to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And another positive about Staten Island is you came from there. So that's a plus. But why don't we jump into the construction job and kind of like take us through that? I've never done anything even close to the realm of construction. Like, I'm lucky if I can change a light bulb. So why was that something you got into aside from the money? And why was it such a good place for you to be to start out?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So like I said, I went to college, and when I was about to graduate, I wound up actually it was my senior year. So the beginning of my senior year, I had an opportunity, someone I knew, to get me into a construction union. And I didn't know, I never worked construction before. I did always work, but like never anything like physical labor like that. So I was like, I don't know. And they were like, oh, this is how much you'll make. And I was like, all right, I was like, fine, like I'll do it out of college. Like, it can't be that bad. So I actually I wanted like a taste of it before I went into it full time. So my winter break of senior year, I worked for the whole month in Manhattan. And I enjoyed it. It wasn't anything bad. It was hard work, but like, I was like, all right, the check is nice. So I'll do it after college. So long story short, I graduate. Everyone was going out and celebrating the graduation, and I went home, went to bed because I worked the next day. And the reason I say it was the best decision I made to do it is because the work ethic and what you learn from working in construction is you would never know. So I worked in the concrete. My trade was cement mason. So we poured the floors of all high-rise buildings. I worked on some of the biggest projects in New York City. So I learned a trade, which was awesome. It's a trade that I'll never forget and I'll take with me for the rest of my life. And, you could use it in more than just pouring floors. You could do sidewalks, driveways, backyards, etc. Also, I learned a lot about myself in the sense of like, what you have to do to like continue to work, because it's not a job. It's not a secure job. You could get laid off any second. The foreman doesn't like the way you work, they'll lay you off. So you go from making a lot of money to making nothing. So you go there every day and you have to work. There's no standing around. So I got engraved in my head. Never, hands are never in your pockets. There's always something to do, always look busy. So I got like, if you're not early, this stays with me constantly. If you're not early, you're late. So work starts at 7 a.m., but you better be there by 6:30, or again, they're handing you a check, you're sending you home. And I worked with some of the toughest, strongest men, like, not like talking about the gym wise, but like they really were like tough guys. And I learned a lot from them. And it's like I said, it's carried with me until now, and I don't think I'll ever lose it. And the fact that like you're waking up at the crack of dawn and you're getting home late afternoon, and no matter what the weather is, you're working cold, hot. So you really do. You learn a lot about yourself. I suggest for anybody, if like you don't know what you want to do and you just don't know what direction, if you have an opportunity to work a construction job, I do it, even if you don't plan to stay with it, but you will take a lot from it that you'll never lose.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I almost hear a lot of parallels between your construction experience and my experience playing football. Not that those two things are even similar in any respect, but the lessons that we learned from them sound really, really similar. And I love that you said never have your hands in your pockets. And for me, it was never walk when you're between the white lines. When you're on the field, you're running wherever you're going.
Yep.
And it's stuff that stays with me to this day, and it's clearly shaped who you are today. And I think one of the beautiful things about what we talk about on this podcast is that struggle, challenge, hardship, adversity, they all shape us in some way, shape, or form. And they could go one of two ways. We can be crushed by those things, or we can elevate because of those things. We can rise up to the occasion and gain strength, gain a new perspective, and be better off. So the first big question that I want to ask you, Frankie, is what's the hardest thing or circumstance that you've ever had to handle as a person?
So actually, it's funny you said the adversity. On my tattoo over here, if you see it, it says
Yeah.
built through adversity. That's like something I always said is like all the things that I've went through made me who I am, built me into the person that I am. Like we remember the good things, yes, but those bad things are really what build your character. So I've had a bunch of rocky roads along the way, but I'll go back to like the first thing I think that really set that foundation was when I was about 12 or 13, my parents got divorced. And it wasn't just like a clean cut divorce. Like, there was a lot of events that led up to it. And afterwards, between the court battles and being such a young kid, but not that young. And what I mean by that is I was old enough to know what was happening, but still young enough not to realize the details of everything. So I was kind of like, clueless, and no one's going to tell me because I'm young. And I had to grow up at a pretty young age because I didn't want to be in my house, seeing my parents, fighting or not getting along. Then they finally separated and moved out, and then my mom got remarried. So, I was out early, leaving, coming home late, and I was lucky enough to have like a close knit group of friends of like, there were like 8 of us, and they all had their own share of home problems, and we kind of leaned on each other. So I had a great support system, but it definitely helped me deal with a lot of things going forward, because that was like the first real piece of adversity that I had to deal with, and getting used to, maintaining equal relationship with both parents, which most people don't. It usually falls like, someone stays with the mother or someone stays with the father. But like, I made it like my world to like make sure that I was just as close with my mother and just as close with my father and do things with my mother. And like my dad was my boxing trainer. So that was where we bonded. I would go to the gym with him and like spend time with him. So it really, for such a young age, I think I handled it pretty well. And that definitely, like I said, built that base of adversity.
Yeah. Did you grow up with siblings, Frankie?
Yes, I have one older sister.
Gotcha. So I'm curious, did your older sister have a similar experience and takeaway from that whole piece of adversity? Did she also maybe feel like she grew through that and ended up in a better place eventually because of it?
She did. She didn't have as similar of an experience because she was 2 years older than me, so she understood a little bit more. And instead of telling me, she kind of tried to like keep me from it. So she would, as best as she could, is like she'd cushion it and tell me, try everything's all right. Like, so she definitely grew as a person in her own way, a lot different than I did. I eventually figured things out as I got older and, developed my own sense of everything. But she grew as a person too, just in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. And the tattoo that you have on your arm, the
Yeah.
one about adversity, where did that come from?
So it's actually, so that's the text going down the tricep. The rest of
Yeah.
it is the Spartans and the Persians. So what inspired this was, so I'm Greek and I have family in Sparta. So that was like initially why I took interest in the Spartans. And me and my father watched the movie 300, and I love that movie. But like it's a great movie, but when you actually read into the story of the Spartans, you are inspired by it in a sense because it was 300 Spartans against, I think it was 7,000 Persians. And they stood their ground for, I think it was 4 days until they were finally defeated, but like they never gave up. And I paired that with Built Through Adversity because they were thrown every piece of adversity throughout those 3 or 4 days and stood their ground, and it kept making them stronger. And even though they were defeated, it eventually led to why they grew so strong because they took after those original 300.
Yeah, and in that movie, now you might know this better than I do, but there's a scene where the army of 300 is going to wherever they need to get to, and they come across someone and they say, "This is all you have," like, like you don't have enough soldiers or whatever. And the leader, which I don't know the
Oh, I
name,
know what you're gonna say.
and you know what I mean?
I
What
love
you
the part.
you should tell it because I am obviously
Yeah,
butchering
so
this.
I was actually going to mention these guys. So they had a couple of different alliances from I think it was pretty sure it was Greece as well, who helped them out. But those people eventually fled because they got scared. They got killed and defeated. So they fled and left. But those people that you're referring to, they met them and they had like a bigger number of people than the 300. And he was like, oh, all you have is 300. And King Leonidas was like, he was like, what'd he say? Oh yeah, he was like, asking each one of them, what do you do? And he's like, I'm a blacksmith. I'm a iron, whatever he was. And then he goes, Spartans, who are we? And then they all
Yeah.
chanted at the same time. He was like, that's what we do. Like, so it just showed like maybe there's 300, the number didn't matter because they're actually warriors at heart.
Yeah, exactly. You told that so well. It actually brings to mind a Japanese proverb that I think is applicable to this conversation. And it goes, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And I almost wonder if you have that spirit of a warrior that you carry with you. I mean, it seems like you do from the outside, like this peaceful warrior, right? Like you're
Yeah.
not running around trying to cause problems, but should something come up, right? You have the heart of a warrior inside of you. Do you feel like that's you?
Yeah, I definitely, growing up and I boxed my entire life and then I did MMA for a little bit. I definitely have that, that sense of self-defense. And if needed, I could defend myself, but I am a very, passive, calm person. I don't want any problems with anyone. But, self-defense was ever needed, 100%.
Yeah, obviously. So, okay, so you go into the world of boxing, you said, right? A little bit.
I
And that's
started that when I was like in fourth grade. Yeah, that was like the
oh,
first thing.
okay. So you're bonding with your dad there, and take us a little bit through the world of boxing because I would imagine that's something that not many people listening to this podcast ever get to experience.
Yeah, so boxing, that's another thing. That's another area where you'll learn about a lot about yourself too. Um, that I actually posted a story about this recently on Instagram. I started that when I was in fourth grade, and it's not something you could just jump into. I mean, this is really with anything. Like just like running, you're not gonna run 100 miles in 1 week in your first time running, but like you're not gonna jump in the ring and spar someone or fight someone in your first month there. You need to learn. So I was I started boxing in like fourth grade, and I kept watching all these more experienced people in the ring, and they made it look so easy and fun because they've experienced. But I'm young, and I'm just like, Dad, I want to get in there. I want to get in there. I want to get in there. And he's like, You're not ready. You're not ready. And I'm like, I just kept hounding him. I want to get in there. So one day he was like, All right, you want to get in there? So I'll put you in. So he put me in with a kid who was a little bit heavier than me, but he was my age. And I went in the ring, and this kid beat me to a pulp. For 3 rounds, I fell on the floor like 3 times. And I remember towards the end, I fell on the floor and I pretended I was knocked out because I quit. And I laugh at that story, but at the same time, like I think back to that a lot. And that was like the kind of mentality I had. Like I said, I was very shy, like timid kid. So I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. And my dad pulled me out of the ring and he was like, Are you ready to learn now? And I was like, ready to learn the right way. So like you learn, you learn a lot in the sense about yourself of like giving up and having that mental toughness in the ring. And over the years, I started to build that more. And I wish I built it earlier. And because I did waste a lot of talent. I was very good at boxing, but I never pursued it or excelled the way I should have because I just didn't have that confidence in myself. It's a great sport. It's seriously one of my favorite sports that I've ever participated in.
So I have two questions, totally different directions. So I'm going to ask the more serious one first.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to look back at younger Frankie and have a conversation with him about confidence, what would you tell him? What would you tell your younger self?
I would say stop doubting yourself. You doubt yourself so much. The first, like, I had a problem with like comparing myself or this, I'll never be as good as this one, or look how good like, stop doubting yourself instead of like thinking so much, just do it and see what you're capable of because you really are so capable of so much and you're wasting so much talent. Just there's no reason for you to doubt yourself. And I think about it, all the time because I really did for a long time doubted myself, and I had to overcome it. And it took time, but we always wish we knew then what we know now.
Yeah, and I think in the world of social media today, it's easier than ever. I can't imagine if we were in middle school, elementary school, and Instagram was the way it is,
Oh,
and TikTok. I mean, it would be a nightmare.
yeah. I'm so happy that was non-existent back then.
Yeah, the good old days where you had to call your friend's house phone and talk to their parents and ask if they were
Yeah,
home.
yeah.
But anyway, so my less serious question is, have you ever knocked somebody out? And if so, what does that feel like? Because my interpretation of it, right? If I were to ever punch somebody, say, I'm imagining myself punching someone in the face, which is really hard for me because I'm not that kind of person, but I would imagine it feels really satisfying. And at the same time, I think I would feel really bad on the inside. What is that experience like if you've experienced that?
So I never knocked someone out cold,
Okay.
but I've hit someone where they like had they blacked out, they fell to the ground, like took a couple seconds for them to get up. That happens very often. It's happened a bunch of times. The thing with boxing is there's a quote that says like the ring is the loneliest place in the world because it's you and someone else, and that someone else is someone who doesn't have good intentions. So when you go in that ring, there's always, the intentions are for me to come out not hurt. So their intention is the same. And they want to hurt you, basically. That's, or they want to stop the threat. So when that happens, it, like you said, it is satisfying. It's nice. You don't necessarily feel bad in the moment, but always good sportsmanship after the fight. Like, you shake hands, great fight, whatever. But like in the fight, it's nice. Like when you get that hit in, it's a good feeling.
Yeah, I would imagine. And I think it's also interesting if you look at boxing, right? And I guess it's a case by case scenario, but say you have a fight, it's aggressive, it's intense, and you get to the end and then you shake hands and you have a laugh and you say, nice job. That was really great. It's
Yeah.
such a unique mix of emotions. Where
Yeah, it really is. It was like there's been like times where I'm in the middle of the ring for 3 rounds, 4 rounds with one person, and we were just pounding on each other's head, and like it looks like you hate each other, but then like after we're like hugging like we're best friends because like that was awesome. We just had we just had great work. Like it's that camaraderie and that like sportsmanship that I loved about it. Like being able to shake hands after we just punched each other in the face for 20 minutes.
Yeah. Does that translate, do you feel, to other parts of life? Like, are your relationships with other people shaped by your experience boxing? Do you see people in a different way because of that experience?
um, I see, in a sense, I guess I could see people, at least where I came from, a lot of people when you go out or you're at a bar or whatever, there's a lot of people there that will look to start fights. And I kind of learned that the people who are like most like lethal, people who know what they're doing, are not the ones to start fights and engage with people like that. They're not the loudest in the room. And I noticed the ones that are like always doing that, they're probably not that confident in themselves, and they're kind of doing that to like a big bark, no bite
Yeah.
though. So I noticed that a lot when I'm very observant. So I noticed that a lot because I'm not the type to be, causing a scene like that. That's the one thing that I would say boxing translated into,
Mm.
like that kind of outlook on people.
Yeah. So you just sparked something in my mind that I was not planning on talking about at all. But a few months ago, I went to a local school here in Philadelphia, and I talked to a group of students about adversity, perspective, gratitude, etc. And at the end, there was a question and answer. I got probably about 20 questions, and at least 10 of them were about bullying. And it really caught me off guard because bullying was something, sure, I experienced it. I witnessed it in elementary school, middle school, maybe even high school, maybe, but it wasn't something that I had really thought about since. And I'm curious, in your childhood experience, or even now, just as an adult, when you think of bullying, is that something that's like still on your awareness, on your radar? Did you experience that as a kid?
I never, I did. You know what? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, they were like a group of kids from the neighborhood who I grew up with. I was a younger kid, quiet. But I always boxed. That's the thing, and I knew. Again, this goes to the confidence in myself. I didn't have the confidence in myself to stand up to them, and they didn't go to my school or whatever. But like they would, I'd see them on the train ride home or around the neighborhood, and they would like I'm not gonna say like try to beat me up per se, but like push my buttons and I guess bully me, if you will. And I never did anything about it until I got older and I was able to stand up for myself, not in like a physical aspect, but like I was more confident in myself, and like they knew they couldn't do that anymore. And I became friends with a lot of them and like gained their respect because I'm not like that shy, timid kid anymore. That was the most of bullying that I did experience because for the most part, even when I was younger, people knew that I was a boxer, and I never really had any issue with that.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't mess with you either. So, um,
It's not for
with
me to sound like I'm a tough guy. I'm just saying like That was just how it came off.
Yeah, yeah, and I genuinely mean that. I mean, well, I wouldn't mess with anybody, but it's not my style. But you carry yourself with a quiet confidence, and I think that's important. And what I want to translate this into now is really the next question. But before I pose this question, you and I both share a mutual understanding of the phrase "go one more," right?
Mhm.
That's the motto for Bear Performance Nutrition. It's something that a lot of us have really taken to and we strive to embody. So I want you to keep the "go one more" motto in mind when I ask this question.
Okay.
So the question is, what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose, and why have you done that thing? And if you want to tie in kind of that mindset to it, I think that could be pretty cool.
Okay. So the hardest thing I think, and this is actually recently, hardest thing I put myself through on purpose was the past like 5 months or so. Within 4 or 5 months, I completed my first half marathon, my first bodybuilding competition, and then my first full marathon. That was on my body and on my mind the hardest thing I've signed myself up for. Um, I did that because so many years of like doubting myself and not living up to my full potential finally like got to me. And it's not like it wasn't like a thing I did to boast because I'm not boasting about it at all. But I was like, I want to prove to myself that I could do this. But it didn't start off that way. It initially started off with I got into into the endurance space and I wanted to run a half marathon. So I ran the half marathon, but before that, it was actually a couple of weeks before the half marathon, I got an offer from my coach, to start a prep and compete in November, a bodybuilding prep. So I started while in half marathon prep, which isn't the smartest thing because you're cutting calories and running, you need calories. And then straight from that half marathon into prep, which was about 9 weeks long. And that in itself, on my body, on my mind, was extremely, extremely difficult. And where I could compare it, like in running, it's mentally tough while you're doing it.
Mm.
This was mentally tough every single day. All day you feel sluggish, run down, you're hungry, your head hurts. The gym is like a job and it's not enjoyable. And you just want to be like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And then I did the competition and I wound up winning first place. And then from the competition started marathon prep. And this was kind of not, it wasn't the smartest decision. I wanted to run in the Go One More marathon, and it was something I didn't want to miss out on. But I only had about 9 weeks of training for that, coming off of no running for 9 weeks in prep, no eating. So my body was depleted. And throughout that process of running, there were 1,000 times where I told myself, I should just push this back. I should just run the half marathon. And then I just kept saying, no, you're proving to yourself that you are capable of anything you want. Even if you don't finish in the specific time that you like, you still did this. You still put yourself through it. So we could tie that into the Go One More mindset, because I'm constantly striving to do more. And it's not only like one more rep in the gym or one more mile when running. I'm constantly striving to challenge myself and better myself and learn more about myself in any aspect one more time every single time.
Yeah. And I just have to add, when we were down in Austin for the BPN Ambassador weekend, there was a moment where we were getting ready to head out on the party cruise on the lake.
Yeah.
And, everybody's wearing like shorts and a t-shirt. And I believe you had on like jeans and a long sleeve zip up, and you were like a little cold because you were
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
you were like not skin, bones and muscle, but you were just nearing like kind of that, you were in
Depleted.
prep.
I was
Yeah.
completely depleted.
Yeah. And I was like, I almost felt bad. I felt bad for you. You looked like you were hurting a little bit.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I see pictures now of that because I was 3 weeks out then, and I had like black bags under my eyes, my cheekbones were showing. I was like, oh my god.
yeah, well, that's part of the process. But I think what I heard here was, so like half marathon, bodybuilding prep, full marathon, and
Yep.
you easily could have made an excuse or made a change of plans, but you didn't because you wanted to show up and do what you said you were going to do. And I think that is really where confidence comes from. When you say you're going to do something and you follow through, when your words and actions match. And for me, that's been something that's been a daily practice, right? Waking up when my alarm goes off, taking a cold shower when I say I'm going to take one, even when I don't want to, getting everything done, even things that people wouldn't think of, like sending a nice message to a person in my contact list who I haven't talked to in a while, right? That's a hard thing. And I try to do those things on a daily basis, in part because that's where confidence comes from, but two, that's how you grow. And so I'm curious for you, like on a smaller scale in your day to day or even week to week, what are some of the things that you've built into your life? Because clearly you're a very driven person. You produce a lot of quality content on social media. How do you do that, and why do you do that?
So I guess we could start back to when I started sharing my content and all that. So this goes back to, when I turned, I would say 21. Everybody gets into that part in their life where you're 21, you want to go out, you want to have fun, whatever. So I did that for a while, and just quickly I realized like this isn't the life that I want. Like I'm not enjoying this. Like I had fun, there's great times, and there was a point of my life where like I had 10 different friend groups and I had plans every single weekend, but like I just wasn't fulfilled. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I saw people who were older than me that were still doing it. And I was like, I definitely don't want to be doing it when I'm older. So I got to about 24, 25, and I was like, I want to change my life. Actually, it was before I was 25. I was about 24, and I was like, I want to change my life. And the thing was, like I said, I come from Staten Island. It's very close knit. Everybody knows each other. So it's very small. Everybody does the same thing for the most part. And if you don't, it's considered out of the norm. So anything out of what everybody, like in the summer, everybody goes to the same place. In the winter, everybody goes to the same place. So for me to not do that, I was going to get pushback. And that was playing in my head a lot. And I eventually got to the point where I was like, I don't care. I'm just not going to do it. So it started off with friends, still asking me to come out on the weekend. I'm like, nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm good. And then I started sharing my content, just my journey, my fitness journey on Instagram and then TikTok. And initially people that followed me, most of my following were people that I knew or, had at some point had known. So they, like I said, it was out of the norm. They're used to seeing other types of content. They didn't want to see me working out. And I would get comments or messages, like you're posting too much fitness stuff, or, oh, you're an influencer, you're trying to be an influencer. And I was like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm posting what I want to post. And they're like, make a fitness account. And like, I never wanted to make a fitness account because Instagram or social media is not for me to post to please you. I'm posting my life. I'm not going to have a fake, like one account to show one side of my life and one side of another account for another side of my life. This is my life, and I'm not lying. I'm not sugarcoating it. I take my health and fitness seriously. And people, that like a few people I thought were friends, I stopped talking to. And like I said, people made a lot of comments, but posting it on like TikTok, it wound up, I remember I posted something along the lines of like me changing my lifestyle and going out, or I showed like a picture of me when I was like not in the best shape into working out now. And it took off. And the amount of messages and feedback I got from that was like amazing. People struggling with the same thing. And they're like, oh, I have a toxic group of friends. I want to change my life, but I'm nervous for what people are going to say. And like thousands of people asking me for advice on how to do it. And that was like an amazing feeling because I've always had a passion to help people. And if I could help and make a difference in people's life in any way, it makes my day. So that's what my initial purpose for sharing content was, just because I wanted to show like my fitness. And then eventually it came to, now I really have a purpose to do this. Now I want to help people and show people that it's possible for them too. So eventually people who made comments. I'm pretty sure most of them unfollowed me at this point. A lot of people wound up seeing what I was doing in the long run, have reached out, and like you said, I respect it. And then it even brought me in contact and closer with some people that I maybe knew along my life growing up, and like they reached out and were like, yo, I love what you're doing, and asked me for advice, and I was able to help them. And we were never close before maybe, but now I have a relationship with them. And then it brought me, losing all those toxic people brought me to more like-minded people such as you know, BPN, different companies and brands that I got to work with. And that's been my whole purpose with that the entire time.
And there's just so much to dig into there. And let me just start off by saying that your story is really similar to mine in a lot of ways. It's also very different. But the common thread throughout both of our stories is that we were in a place, and for me, it was college and drinking. And for you, it was maybe just your social group and what they were doing. And we were in a place where we realized we didn't want to be there. But leaving that place meant also maybe cutting some ties with the relationships that we were comfortable with, the relationships that we had. And it brings you to this lonely place for a while, right? And it can last different lengths of time for different people. But on the other side of that place, you find a new community, you find support, you find other people who are where you were. And that's the beautiful part about the journey and that process. And the other thing I'll say too is one of my favorite quotes, and something that we've used for Project Endure from the beginning, is by Friedrich Nietzsche. And he said, "Those who dance are considered insane by those who can't hear the music." And right, it's so true, right? And it's, you know, when you are dancing to your own music and other people can't hear it, right? Your friends, when you were doing the fitness stuff, they were like, I don't get it. Why? And you don't have to justify yourself to anybody. And that's the beautiful part about all of this.
I learned that you don't owe an explanation to anybody except your family, if you have a wife or a husband, and your closest friends. So I eventually didn't even acknowledge it because I don't owe an answer. I don't owe an explanation to anybody. And originally, when I was in those beginning stages, I felt like I had to like justify myself and like, you know, try to ease tension. And now I don't care. I didn't care. I still like, I don't care anymore what anybody has to say, although it's not really negative anymore, but you're always going to have somebody hating on you for something.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, what other people think about us is none of our business, really. That's someone else's problem. And there's a great quote that I want to bring up too. Before I tell you who the quote is by, I'm going to read the quote. So it goes like this. "My mother said to me, if you're a soldier, you'll become a general. If you're a monk, you'll become the Pope. Instead, I was a painter and became Picasso, Pablo Picasso."
Oh.
I think the point is, right, like we can spend our whole lives doing what we think other people want us to do or we think we should do, but our full potential is really only available when we're fully authentic and when we're fully ourselves. And the sad part is I see so many people, friends of mine, clients of mine, people on social media who are living a life that they think other people want to see rather than the life they know deep down that they should be living. So if you were to talk to someone like that, Frankie, like there are people listening to this podcast, and in fact, I know there are, who are in a place where they don't want to be, but they're afraid to make that change for whatever reason. What would you say to those people?
I basically tell everybody that reaches out pretty much along the lines of the same thing. I say, like, what do you want to change and why do you want to change it? I mean, when you say why, when they answer with their why, it's usually good enough. Like that's perfect. Like, so I say, where can you make your changes? What are you surrounding yourself with daily? What can you do differently daily to make it better? And what do you want long term? Are any of these people or anything that is stopping you from doing this, are they going to affect your future, or are you just worried about what someone is going to say? They're going to speak words about you or to you. If there's no significant impact on your life by doing what you want, then do it. Live your life for you, not to live to please someone else, because in the long run, it's your life and they're not going to be around, and you are going to live how they want you to, and eventually look back and say, wow, I missed out on so much time, so much opportunity, and so much potential because I was worried about what someone who had no meaning in my life was going to say. So if you want to do something or you want to make a change and you're struggling because you're just worried about the pushback you're going to get, I promise you, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. It might sting for a second and you're going to be like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And then that's it. You're just going to keep moving forward. And now you broke loose. Once you break loose of caring about what people think about you, your opportunities are endless. You're gonna have no self-doubt when you're about to post something you want to post or speak how you want to speak, because now you don't care. And then you know what that is, you're showing people your true self, you're being authentic, and then that will attract the right people. And then it's just it just rolls from there, because now you're attracting the right people who are on the same path with the same mindset. And then you could excel even more with them, and then so on and so forth. So I promise you, it may seem like it's such a big hump to get over when you're initially trying to start making that change, but it all takes off after that. And it's really not as bad as you're making it out to be.
Yeah, and what I would just add to that, and to circle back to part of your story, is I think it's in the Bible: a prophet is never welcome in his hometown. And when you make that change around the people who are closest to you, I think oftentimes, in your experience, in my experience, and the experience of so many others, that's not welcomed, because that change means you're moving in a direction that oftentimes is where other people realize they probably should be moving in that direction. Like, hey, maybe I shouldn't be partying all the time. And they see you actively doing that, and they're not going to like that because they don't want to change, because that's uncomfortable.
Yep.
And so the beautiful thing, though, is just like you said, and I've had this happen to me over and over again, those kids that you grew up with who maybe you weren't friends with, maybe like didn't really interact with you, they start to reach out and they're like, hey man, like I really admire what you're doing. Like I kind of want to do that too. Like, can we connect? And you start to realize that more people than not actually want to do exactly what you're doing, which is just being authentic.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That that word authentic, like someone actually, it's happened like a couple times actually in the past week. I got messages from people that follow me, and they all said, like, use the same word, and they said, like, I think people are attracted to like your authenticity and like how genuinely like you speak. And I think that's why people listen when you speak. And I never looked at it that way. I just kind of looked at it as like, you know, I'm telling my story, but people really do appreciate the authenticity, and it's true. It really gets you far.
Yeah, and it's also the most freeing feeling in the world when you don't have to worry about who you are, and if you're comfortable with who you are and you could be authentic, like you don't have to worry about much. You can just live, and
Yeah,
it's freedom.
exactly. And then capture the moments, and that's it.
Yeah. So to shift gears just a little bit, so the Project Endure podcast is in part about endurance, and obviously the half marathon, the full marathon, whatever else you have down the road, you are now in the world of endurance sport. But when I say the word endurance, what comes to mind for you?
So with endurance, the words keep going comes to mind like almost immediately. Basically, to me, what endurance could mean is being able to keep going even when it gets hard. So you could talk about that physically, like in the endurance space, or you could talk about that mentally. And that's constantly training yourself to be able to keep going. So physically, you know, that's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to train yourself, you're going to run weekly. But mentally, what are you going to do to get yourself to keep going when things get hard? So how are you going to strengthen your mind? How are you going to build that endurance up? So that's what I think of when I hear endurance, keep going.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing too, I think you're spot on. The physical aspect of endurance is pretty self-explanatory, and the mental side of endurance is a little bit more ambiguous. It's harder to grasp. It's not as tangible. But I think the beautiful thing about physical fitness is physical barriers allow you to realize where your mental barriers are, and physical endeavors allow you to actually push physically through a mental barrier. And I actually wanted to ask you about your marathon experience down at BPN. I know it didn't go exactly how you planned, but I'm sure there were plenty of moments in that race where either your body and or your mind wanted to stop and you had to tap into something else that was going to say, no, we're going to keep going.
Yeah, so that's actually a perfect story into this with that word. Yeah, so like I said, I trained for 9 weeks for the marathon. It's not an excuse. I'm just stating that I obviously undertrained for that. So when people would ask me like, "Oh, what's your goal?" I would say sub 4 would be nice, but I in the back of my mind, I was like, if I finish and my legs are good, I'd be pretty happy. While I was running it, it was a very hilly course and the winds were very hard. And I was running and I noticed by like mile 19, I looked at my watch when like I hit the mile. And based on the time, I was on pace to hit like a 340, 345. And I was like, I kind of got happy and I was like, wow, I was like, I could actually get sub 4 and that would be awesome. Mile 20 comes and my quad starts twitching and I'm like running, but trying to rub it out. It's obviously not working. I'm like chugging G1M more than I was before. And 20.5 comes and I go to take a step and it just locked. And I went like to take that step and like bring my leg back and I couldn't. And I fell on the floor.
Oh,
And when I tell you, I looked at my quad and it was painfully convulsing, like literally convulsing. And I was rolling on the street, like screaming because it hurt so bad. And the biggest thing was, but I think this is a blessing in disguise. Nobody was around. I was in between aid stations, and anyone who raced that race knows we're in the farmland of Texas. So like it was a private race. There weren't crowds or anything. It was aid stations every 2 miles. So one kid wound up running by and he was like, I'll go tell them you're down. So I'm sitting there and I can't bend my leg. And I'm like, all right, what do I do? And I'm like, do I sit here and wait for this kid to find someone a mile away and then they come get me? And then that's it. Then I'm at mile 20 and they're going to wheel me off. Like, I was like, absolutely not. So I bent my leg, finally got it to bend. I stand up. It was extremely painful and it was still convulsing. But like, I was like, I'm going to get moving. Maybe it'll go away. Now I'm running. In the last 6 miles were the hilliest part. And my left starts convulsing the same way. So now they're both just going nuts. I can't bend my legs. I'm straight legging it. And when I tell you nobody was around me for 6 miles, like nobody, I didn't see anyone behind me and I didn't see anyone ahead of me. And it was just quiet wind and my thoughts. And when I tell you every second of those 6 miles, every thought that came in my head was next aid station, stop. Next aid station, stop. Ask them to drive you back. You can't run. Now my hamstring started like twitching. And I just I was actually like screaming out loud. I was like, no, no, no. Like I was in the darkest place I think I've ever been in physically and mentally because it was painful and it was long and I was alone and that voice in your head wants you to be comfortable. And I would not allow myself to be comfortable. And finally crossed the finish line. And they actually, Trey Freeman, Nick's videographer, had to carry me somewhere to sit down because I was like, I can't move my legs. And I was like down on myself because I wound up finishing. I think it was like 4:15 around that time. And I guess I'm down on myself, but at the same time, I am very happy that I finished that because I considered a lot of times, like, just let them come get you. You can't walk, like quit. And that voice in your head really, really starts to talk to you. And for you to be able to overcome it, no matter what the circumstance is shows how mentally tough you are. And I did gain like a lot of confidence from that because I now know what I'm able to endure and how far I can push myself. And that's another thing that goes into like these past 3 months of why I say it's like the hardest thing I put myself through is because for 9 weeks, I heard that voice as well in the bodybuilding prep. And it was like, one slice of pizza won't hurt, quit this. What are you doing? You're nuts. Like And I overcame that voice for 9 weeks and wound up succeeding there. And then I did the same thing here, just not in that time frame, but I did the same thing. And you really like you perfectly said, physical barriers really show how strong you are mentally. And once you break those barriers, you're unstoppable.
That is just beautiful, man. That's endurance. And
Yeah.
there's this great image that I've had in my mind for the past couple of years. I came across this guy named Inky Johnson. Have you ever heard of Inky Johnson?
No.
Man, you should Google him as soon as we're done. But he, long story short, he was on his way to the NFL. He was playing his last season of college football, came from a very poor background. So if he made it to the NFL, he was a first round draft pick. It would have been, his family would have been set. It was his dream. And he made a tackle in one of his last games of the season and ended up with a paralyzed arm. And so he couldn't play. And his whole thing is that, one, this is his purpose now. And so he spreads messages of, even though his path was changed for him, he's still pushing forward and he's doing his best, and he's changing lives. He's one of the best speakers I've ever heard, and it's amazing. But one of the things he talks about is that other person deep down inside, the other person who could do more, who could give more, who could be more. And I think the more we tap into that person, the more we become that person. So, right, there's that superficial person in our head who's like, hey, stop, eat that slice of pizza. You don't have to finish this race. And there's that other person deep down who says, no, I can keep going. Let me keep going. And the more you tap into that person, the more you become that person.
Yeah.
And it's just such a beautiful thing to watch happen. And that story was a perfect example of that.
Yeah, it really was. And I mentioned it in my Instagram post. It brought me, when I was on the floor, it brought me back to me being on the floor when I was in 4th grade and I started boxing, the story I told earlier. And like, I quit then. I pretended I was knocked out. I'm done. And I thought about that and I was like, nope, we're finished. And I got up and finished it because I tapped into who I could be. And exactly what I was saying before, what I would tell myself when I was younger is get up. You're capable of a lot more. And that's what I'm constantly striving to prove to myself now. And I feel like I'm unstoppable every single time I do.
Yeah. And it's exactly what I'm trying to instill in the community here at Project Endure is to do hard things, choose hard things, because the more that you can choose and do hard things and overcome that, the more confidence you get. You tap into that other person, you're just a little bit further along, and we're all better off for it. And so with that being said, Frankie, I want to ask you the final question, and want to preface this by saying there are hundreds of people, hopefully someday thousands, and if not tens of thousands of people listening to the podcast, and they're going to come across these words. And somebody out there listening is in a hard place. They're going through something challenging, and they have no control over it, right? They're stuck in this hard situation. If you were to speak directly to that person on the other end of the podcast, what words of advice or guidance would you have for that person?
So if you're going through hard times, there's one of 3 things that you could do, and it could define you, it could destroy you, or it can make you stronger. If you let it define you, you're letting yourself be known as the person that's going through X, or this happened to that person, and that's all you're just gonna let it beat you like that. If you let it destroy you, you let it completely stop you in your tracks. You let it basically steer you in whichever direction in life completely overcomes you. If you let it strengthen you, you're taking a step back. And although this situation might be uncontrollable, but what do we do when something is uncontrollable? We control what we can control the controllables. Now think, it's all about how you react to it, react to what's happening to you and how you look at it. So think to yourself, what is happening to me? Why is this happening to me? What can I learn from this? How can I let this make me a stronger and better person? So I know it's hard when these things are happening. And a lot of times it may hit you later on in life of, oh, that's why that happened. But I promise you there's a reason for anything and everything that's happening to you. So if you are going through a hard time, take a step back, try not to act on emotion, and think, what can I do to approach this and fix it? And what can it do to make me a better person? What do I learn from this situation? There's always a lesson to be learned. So whenever you're going through hard times, think back to that.
That is such great advice and such a great question. What can I learn from this? I think if we ask that more often throughout life in general, the perspective that we would develop, the things we would learn, and the ways we would grow would be incredible. And I would just add to that, I think it's really easy to ask the question, why me? And I think it's way better to ask the question, why not me? Because anything that any of us are given, we can handle it. We just have to figure out how. And Frankie, with that being said, man, I just want to thank you for this conversation because it is 7 p.m. almost here, which is basically my bedtime. And I am ready. I'm ready to run through a brick wall. So I appreciate you.
I know,
man.
me too.
Hey, where can people find you on social media if they want to connect, reach out, learn more about your story, and follow along?
Yeah, so you could follow me on Instagram at Frankie Fades. It's my name. My initials are switched. Frankie Dades is my name. Dranky Fades is my handle. And on TikTok, Frankie the Greek. If you want to message me, though, Instagram would be better. I always get back to people in messages on Instagram. So you could reach out to me there and we could connect.
Yeah. And if anybody needs like small doses of this conversation spread throughout every single day for the rest of their lives, just follow Frankie and you're covered. So
Thank you, Joe.
you're welcome, man. So thank you again. And we'll have to do round 2 sometime in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.